On December 31, 2008, a single gunshot at Philadelphia's most exclusive New Year's Eve party silenced the celebrations at the Thorne mansion. The body of Roland Thorne, CEO of Thorne Pharmaceuticals and one of the city's most powerful men, lay sprawled on imported marble, blood seeping into his white tuxedo shirt. As Detective Emily Martinez would soon discover, his death was not just a crime of passion, but the culmination of a decades-long pattern of predation and abuse. The investigation would reveal a web of manipulation connecting a desperate medical student, a scorned trophy wife, and a trail of destroyed lives, all leading to that fatal moment when the clock struck midnight. 6 months earlier, 20-year-old Octavia Smith stood before her bedroom mirror, practicing the smile she'd wear to her father's company gala. At 20, she possessed the kind of beauty that turned heads, sleek black hair falling past her shoulders, high cheekbones inherited from her late mother, and eyes that held both innocence and determination. Her fingers traced the hem of her borrowed cocktail dress, a simple black number that spoke of aspirations beyond her current means. Downstairs, Dominic Smith adjusted his tie for the third time, his weathered hands betraying a slight tremor. At 45, he carried himself with the careful dignity of a middle manager at Thorne Pharmaceuticals, where he'd spent the last 15 years climbing the corporate ladder rung by modest rung. The modest 3-bedroom house in suburban Philadelphia's Upper Merion Township represented everything he'd achieved since immigrating from Taiwan, a slice of American middle-class comfort earned through countless overtime hours and careful budgeting. "Dad, are you sure this dress is appropriate?" Octavia called down, her voice carrying a hint of anxiety. Dominic climbed the stairs, pausing at his daughter's doorway. The sight of her caught him off guard, no longer the little girl who used to fall asleep reading biology textbooks, but a young woman on the cusp of her dreams. "You look just like your mother," he said softly, remembering Linda, who'd passed away 5 years ago after a brief battle with pancreatic cancer. The medical bills from that time still haunted their credit score, a secret burden Dominic carried alone. The Thorne Pharmaceuticals annual gala represented more than just a corporate event for the Smiths. For Dominic, it was a chance to solidify his position in the company's middle management, crucial now that Octavia's medical school applications were approaching. For Octavia, it was an opportunity to network, to perhaps find a way to bridge the gap between her perfect MCAT scores and their financial reality. Roland Thorne's presence dominated the grand ballroom of the Philadelphia Ritz-Carlton before he even arrived. At 62, he had built Thorne Pharmaceuticals from a small generic drug manufacturer into a pharmaceutical powerhouse. His name graced medical research centers and university buildings across the city, including the very institutions where Octavia dreamed of studying medicine. When Roland finally made his entrance, the crowd parted like waves before a ship's bow. His silver hair and tailored Anderson and Shepherd suit projected authority, but it was his eyes, sharp and assessing, that truly commanded attention. His wife Catherine, 20 years his junior, clung to his arm with practiced elegance, her blonde hair and Valentino gown a stark contrast to the more modest attire of the company's employees. "Dominic," Roland's voice carried across the room as he spotted the Smiths. "And this must be your daughter. I've heard impressive things about your academic achievements, young lady." Octavia felt her heart race as Roland's attention focused on her. Up close, she could see why people found him magnetic. There was an intensity to his gaze that made you feel like the most important person in the room. "Mr. Thorne," she managed, her voice steadier than she felt. "Thank you for the opportunity to attend tonight. Your company's research in oncology actually inspired my interest in medicine." Roland's eyebrows raised slightly, genuine interest flickering across his features. "Call me Roland, please. Perhaps you'd be interested in hearing about our latest clinical trials? Catherine, why don't you get to know Dominic better while I show Ms. Smith our new research presentation?" Catherine's smile remained fixed, but her eyes hardened almost imperceptibly. She turned to Dominic, her voice honeysweet but laden with something darker. "Yes, do tell me about your department, Dominic. I'm always fascinated by what goes on in middle management." As Roland led Octavia away, neither father nor daughter noticed the calculating look that passed between husband and wife, like chess players setting up their pieces for a long game. Catherine's hand lingered a moment too long on Dominic's arm as she guided him toward the bar, while Roland's fingers barely brushed Octavia's back as he directed her toward a quieter corner of the ballroom. That evening marked the beginning of what would later be called, in whispered conversations and sealed court documents, the Thorne affair. But in that moment, as summer heat pressed against the ballroom windows and champagne flowed freely, no one could have predicted how their carefully ordered lives would unravel, or that the next New Year's Eve would end in tragedy. The weeks following the gala brought subtle but significant changes to the Smith household. Octavia found herself invited to more company events, always under the guise of professional development. Roland took a personal interest in her medical school applications, offering to write recommendations and suggesting universities where Thorne Pharmaceuticals had strong connections. Meanwhile, Catherine Thorne began appearing more frequently at the office, her visits to Dominic's department becoming a source of growing discomfort. Her intentions became clear one late afternoon when she cornered him in the empty break room, her perfume heavy in the air between them. "Your daughter is certainly spending a lot of time with my husband," she said, her voice carrying an edge of accusation. "Perhaps we should get to know each other better as well, Dominic." Dominic stepped back, his coffee cup nearly slipping from his grasp. "Mrs. Thorne, I don't think dash." "Catherine," she interrupted, moving closer. "We're all friends here, aren't we?" The scene would play over repeatedly in Dominic's mind in the months to come, as he tried to understand where everything had gone wrong. But on that warm September afternoon, all he could do was mumble an excuse and hurry back to his office, unaware that his rejection had set into motion events that would destroy everything he had worked so hard to build. The autumn of 2008 painted Philadelphia's skyline in shades of gold and crimson as Roland Thorne's mentorship of Octavia Smith took a darker turn. Their first private meeting occurred in his corner office, 40 stories above Market Street, with floor-to-ceiling windows that made Octavia feel like she was floating above the city. "Tell me about your dreams," Roland said, gesturing for her to sit in one of the leather chairs facing his desk. His voice carried the warmth of aged bourbon, smooth and intoxicating. "Not just medical school. What do you really want from life?" Octavia found herself opening up about things she'd never shared with anyone, not even her father. Her fears about their financial struggles, her guilt over her mother's medical bills, her secret desire to do more than just practice medicine, to revolutionize it. Money, Roland mused, moving to sit beside her, should never stand between talent and opportunity. His hand brushed against hers, seemingly by accident. "I could help you, Octavia. In more ways than one." The touch lingered, electric and forbidden. Octavia felt her heart racing, a mix of anxiety and something else she wasn't ready to name. "Mr. Thorne, Roland, I don't know if—" "Just think about it," he said, pulling back with practiced ease. "You're a remarkable young woman, Octavia. You deserve everything life has to offer." Their next meeting was over dinner at Le Becfin, where Roland had reserved the private dining room. The vintage Bordeaux made Octavia's head swim pleasantly as Roland spoke passionately about medical research, his hand occasionally brushing her knee under the table. "I've already spoken to the dean at Penn Med," he mentioned casually. "They're very interested in meeting you. A full scholarship isn't out of the question. With the right support." The first kiss happened in his car, parked in a secluded spot overlooking the Schuylkill River. Roland's expertise made Octavia's previous kisses with college boys seem childish in comparison. His hands tangled in her hair as he pulled her closer, whispering promises against her lips. "I'll take care of everything," he breathed. "Your future, your father's position, all of it. Just trust me." Meanwhile, Catherine Thorne's pursuit of Dominic intensified. She appeared at his office with increasing frequency, her blouse buttons strategically undone, her intentions clear. "Your daughter seems to be flourishing under my husband's guidance," she said one evening, perching on the edge of his desk. "Perhaps you need some guidance of your own, Dominic." Dominic's rejection was firm but polite. "Mrs. Thorne, please. This isn't appropriate." Catherine's smile turned brittle. "Nothing about this situation is appropriate, Dominic. But we all make choices, don't we?" As autumn deepened into winter, Octavia's relationship with Roland grew more intense. Secret meetings in high-end hotel suites, expensive gifts appearing at her door, a Cartier watch, designer clothes, a new MacBook for Huff studies. Each gift came with a note in Roland's distinctive handwriting. For my rising star. Octavia rationalized each step deeper into the affair. The age difference didn't matter. Roland understood her in ways boys her age never could. The secrecy was necessary. People wouldn't understand their connection. When guilt crept in late at night, she thought of medical school, of her father's struggling mortgage payments, of her mother's unpaid medical bills. "You're so much more than just another pretty face," Roland would say, tracing her collarbone with practiced fingers. "You remind me of myself at your age, hungry for success, willing to do whatever it takes." Their encounters grew bolder. Quickies in his office after hours, long weekends at his beach house in Cape May, stolen moments in the company parking garage. Roland's desire for her seemed insatiable, matched only by his promises of a golden future. "I'm restructuring the company's scholarship program," he told her one night as they lay tangled in Egyptian cotton sheets at the Four Seasons. "By next fall, you'll be at Penn Med, fully funded. And that's just the beginning." But there were warning signs, had Octavia chosen to see them. The way Roland's grip tightened possessively when other men looked at her. His increasingly frequent calls and texts, demanding to know her whereabouts. The cold calculation behind his generosity. Catherine watched it all unfold with bitter amusement. Her attempts to seduce Dominic had failed, but she had other ways to make him pay for his rejection. She began collecting evidence, photos, security footage, hotel receipts. Not to expose her husband, she'd learned long ago that scandal would only hurt her own comfortable lifestyle, but to torment the man who had spurned her advances. "Your daughter looks lovely in Valentino," she remarked to Dominic one day, sliding a surveillance photo across his desk. Roland always did have excellent taste in protégés. Dominic stared at the image, Octavia entering the Four Seasons, Roland's hand possessively at her waist, and felt his world begin to crumble. But before he could confront either his daughter or his boss, events would spiral beyond anyone's control. As December approached, Roland's possessiveness intensified. He began questioning Octavia about her male classmates, her social media activity, her every movement when they weren't together. His gifts became more extravagant, a Tiffany necklace, a Hermes bag, a lease on a luxury apartment closer to his office. "You're mine now," he whispered during their encounters, the words both a promise and a threat. "I'll give you everything you've ever wanted, but don't ever think about leaving me." Octavia found herself caught in a web of desire, ambition, and manipulation. The affair that had started as a calculated step toward her dreams had become a dangerous obsession. Roland's promises of medical school and financial security now came with increasingly heavy strings attached. As Christmas decorations appeared across the city, casting their cheerful glow over streets dusted with snow, no one suspected that the upcoming New Year's Eve party at the Thorne mansion would end in bloodshed. The stage was set, the players were in position, and the clock was ticking toward midnight and murder. The spiral into chaos began on a frigid December morning when Catherine Thorne, armed with a thick manila envelope of surveillance photos, strode into Roland's office unannounced. The evidence she'd been meticulously gathering lay scattered across his mahogany desk. Intimate photos of Roland and Octavia, hotel receipts, credit card statements showing lavish gifts. Another one, Roland? And the daughter of a middle manager, no less. Catherine's voice dripped with venom. "Have you completely lost your mind?" Roland barely glanced at the photos, his composure unshaken. "Darling, you're being dramatic. The girl is merely an ambitious intern. I'm mentoring her." Mentoring? Catherine picked up a particularly damning photo, Roland kissing Octavia in the parking garage. "Is this your new method of professional development?" Roland's eyes hardened, though his smile remained pleasant. "Be careful, Catherine. Remember our arrangement. Your lifestyle depends on my generosity. Besides," he added, shuffling the photos into a neat pile, "if anyone's been inappropriate, it's Dominic Smith. Your little attempts at seduction haven't gone unnoticed." Catherine's face flushed with rage and humiliation. "How dare you dare? How many times did you visit his office? How many suggestive emails did you send?" Poor man was quite uncomfortable. In fact, Roland's voice took on a dangerous edge, I'm concerned about his conduct toward female employees in general. The threat was clear. Catherine stormed out, but not before Roland's words sparked an idea. If she couldn't expose her husband without damaging herself, she could at least destroy the man who had rejected her. The next day, HR called Dominic Smith into a meeting. Susan from Human Resources looked uncomfortable as she slid several printed emails across the table. Emails that appeared to be from Dominic to various female employees, including Catherine Thorne, containing inappropriate suggestions and veiled threats. These were anonymously reported, Susan explained. Given the serious nature of the accusations and the evidence provided, these aren't mine, Dominic protested, scanning the emails in horror. I never wrote these. But the decision had already been made. Roland Thorne himself stepped into the room, his expression a perfect mask of corporate concern. Dominic, I'm deeply disappointed. We have a zero-tolerance policy for harassment. I'm afraid we'll have to terminate your employment immediately. As security escorted him out, Dominic caught a glimpse of Catherine watching from her husband's office, a satisfied smile playing on her lips. The financial impact was immediate and devastating. Without Dominic's income, the carefully balanced household budget collapsed like a house of cards. The mortgage payment bounced. Credit card companies began calling. The college savings account, already strained, had to be drained for basic expenses. Octavia, unaware of the true reason behind her father's firing, found herself torn between loyalty to her family and her secret relationship with Roland. When she confronted him about her father's termination, Roland's response was calculated. Sweetheart, your father made his own choices. But don't worry, I'll take care of you. We just need to be more discreet now. But Roland's promises began to ring hollow. The scholarship to Penn Med mysteriously fell through. Other medical schools, despite her stellar MCAT scores, sent polite rejections. It seemed doors were closing rather than opening. Late one night, as Octavia sat in their darkened Kit Smith watching her father sort through job rejections and past due notices, the weight of her choices finally hit her. Her father, once proud and confident, looked aged beyond his years. Dad, she began, her voice trembling. I need to tell you something. Dominic looked up, and in that moment, he knew. The expensive gifts she tried to hide, the late nights, the convenient excuses, it all made terrible sense. How long? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. Since the gala, Octavia confessed, tears streaming down her face. He promised to help with medical school, with our finances. The silence that followed was deafening. Dominic stood slowly, his chair scraping against the linoleum floor. My job, he said flatly. Was it because of? Dad, I didn't know. Catherine tried to, but you rejected her. And then get out. Dominic's voice was quiet but firm. Dad, please Dad. I said get out. He slammed his hand on the table, making the pile of bills flutter to the floor. I lost everything, my job, my reputation, our future. While you were sleeping with the man who destroyed us. Octavia fled to her room, but not before hearing her father's muffled sobs through the thin walls. Their once close relationship lay in shambles, another casualty of Roland Thorne's manipulations. The next morning, Dominic wouldn't meet her eyes at breakfast. The silence between them was thick with unspoken accusations and regret. When Octavia's phone buzzed with a message from Roland requesting a meeting, she stared at it for a long moment before responding. She had lost everything, her dreams of medical school, her father's trust, her own self-respect. As December crept toward its end, with New Year's Eve approaching, Octavia began to formulate a plan. Roland Thorne had taught her well about power and manipulation. Now it was time to put those lessons to use. The week before Christmas, Octavia sat alone in the luxury apartment Roland had leased for her, surrounded by designer gifts that now felt like chains. A notification on her laptop caught her eye, a Facebook message from a woman named Jennifer Hayes. The profile photo showed a woman in her early 30s, but something about her eyes looked haunted. You don't know me, the message read, but we have something in common. Roland Thorne destroyed my life 10 years ago. We should talk. Over coffee at a quiet cafe in Rittenhouse Square, Jennifer revealed a story chillingly similar to Octavia's. She had been 19, an intern at Thorne Pharmaceuticals in 1998. Roland had promised her everything: career advancement, financial security, a future. It ended with her father's mysterious firing and her own abrupt departure from the company. "You're not the first," Jennifer said, stirring her untouched coffee. "And you won't be the last unless someone stops him." There were others: Emily Mitchell in 2001, Rebecca Torres in 2004. Always young, always vulnerable, always with fathers in middle management. Meanwhile, Catherine's campaign of harassment intensified. Anonymous letters arrived at the Smiths' home, detailing Octavia's affair in lurid terms. Dominic's job applications were mysteriously withdrawn or rejected. Their neighbors received hints about inappropriate behavior that had led to his firing. Dominic spiraled deeper into depression. Octavia would find him late at night, staring at old family photos, a glass of whiskey in hand. One night, she overheard him on the phone with their mortgage company, his voice breaking as he begged for more time. "I've worked all my life," he said later, not looking at her. "Built everything from nothing. Now my name is poison in the industry. No one will touch me." Roland, sensing Octavia's growing detachment, became more controlling. His calls and texts grew frequent and demanding. The gifts became more extravagant but felt like bribes. During their encounters, his touch grew rougher, his whispered endearments tinged with threats. "You seem distracted lately, Angel," he said during one meeting, his fingers digging into her wrist. "Remember everything I've done for you. Everything I could still do, good or bad." The breaking point came when Octavia discovered a small recording device in her apartment. Searching further, she found cameras hidden in the bedroom and bathroom. Her skin crawled as she realized the extent of Roland's surveillance. That same evening, Catherine made her final move against the Smiths. Dominic received an email from his last job prospect, a promising position in Boston. The rejection cited disturbing information about his past conduct. Octavia found her father in the backyard, tears freezing on his cheeks in the December cold. A half-empty bottle of whiskey sat beside him. "He took everything," Dominic whispered. "My career, my dignity, my daughter." "No," Octavia said firmly, kneeling beside him. "He hasn't taken me. Dad, I'm so sorry. But I'm going to fix this." Late that night, Octavia began her research. She hacked into Roland's private email using passwords she'd glimpsed over his shoulder. What she found made her blood run cold: correspondence with private investigators tracking her movements, plans to sabotage her medical school applications if she ever tried to leave him, evidence of other young women he'd targeted over the years. More disturbing were the files about her father. Roland and Catherine had orchestrated every detail of Dominic's downfall: the fake harassment claims, the sabotaged job applications, the whisper campaign that had made him unemployable. As New Year's Eve approached, Octavia's plan took shape. Roland's annual party would be the perfect setting. Everyone who mattered in Philadelphia society would be there. The evidence she'd gathered could destroy him, but mere exposure wasn't enough. Roland had survived scandals before. No, she needed something more permanent. Using burner phones purchased with cash, she contacted the other women from Roland's past. Each had their own stories, their own evidence, their own reasons for wanting revenge. Together, they began to weave a web that would trap Roland in his own patterns of abuse and manipulation. "The party starts at 9, Roland told her during their last meeting. "Wear the blue Valentino. I want to show you off one last time before the new year." His words sent a chill down her spine. Did he suspect something? Had she revealed too much? But his smile remained predatory, confident in his control. That evening, Octavia stood before her mirror again, just as she had before the gala where everything began. The blue Valentino dress fit perfectly, another golden chain from her cage. In her clutch, she carried everything she needed for her plan: the evidence, the recordings, and something else, something that would ensure Roland Thorne never destroyed another family. Dominic watched her prepare to leave, his eyes clear for the first time in weeks. "Be careful," he said softly. "Whatever you're planning is dangerous." "I know," Octavia replied, hugging him tightly. But so am I. He taught me that, at least. As she drove toward the Thorne mansion, where Philadelphia's elite would soon gather to welcome 2009, Octavia felt a strange calm settle over her. In her rearview mirror, the city lights twinkled like stars, while ahead, storm clouds gathered over the main line, nature itself seeming to sense the approaching confrontation. The security guard at the mansion's gate recognized her, waving her through with a smile. Music and laughter spilled from the brightly lit windows. Somewhere inside, Roland waited, unaware that his carefully constructed world was about to shatter. Octavia checked her phone one last time. Messages from Jennifer and the others confirmed everything was in place. In less than 6 hours, when the partygoers raised their champagne to toast the new year, Roland Thorne would face a reckoning decades in the making. The days leading up to New Year's Eve unfolded like a deadly chess game. Octavia transformed her small bedroom into a command center, walls covered with evidence collected over weeks of meticulous planning. Photographs, emails, financial records, and surveillance footage, each piece a weapon in her arsenal against Roland Thorne. It all has to look spontaneous, she explained to Jennifer Hayes during their final meeting at a dingy motel off I-95. Roland's survived scandals before because he always sees them coming. This time will be different. Jennifer nodded, sliding over a USB drive. Everything's here, statements from the other girls, bank transfers, recordings of his threats. Emily and Rebecca are ready to come forward when you give the signal. The New Year's Eve invitation arrived on gilt-edged cardstock, Roland's personal note scrawled at the bottom, where the sapphire earrings I gave you. They match your eyes. The jewelry box sat unopened on her dresser, its presence a reminder of everything she'd lost for a few pieces of expensive stone. Catherine Thorne, meanwhile, was orchestrating her own finale. Octavia intercepted an email thread between Catherine and a private investigator. Plans to expose Roland's indiscretions to the board of directors during the party. But Catherine's revenge would come too late. Your wife is planning to expose us, Octavia texted Roland, playing her part. His response came within seconds. Don't worry, Angel. I'll handle Catherine. Focus on looking beautiful for tomorrow night. I have a special surprise planned. The surprise, Octavia discovered through her access to Roland's emails, was an announcement. He planned to divorce Catherine and promote Octavia to a senior position at the company. His final move to bind her to him completely. 3 days before the party, Dominic received an anonymous package. Inside were photos of Roland with other young women over the years, each story eerily similar to Octavia's. His hands shook as he spread them across the Kit Smith table. I should have protected you, he whispered when Octavia found him there. I was so blind. No, Dad, she said, gripping his hand. But you can help me now. I need one last thing to make this work. The plan crystallized in its final form. Jennifer and the other victims would attend the party as +1s of legitimate guests. Catherine's investigator had been persuaded to deliver his evidence at precisely 11:45 p.m. Dominic would arrive at 11:30, carrying the final piece of evidence that would trap Roland completely. Octavia spent hours studying the Thorne mansion's layout, memorizing escape routes and blind spots in the security camera coverage. The catering staff had been infiltrated. Emily Mitchell's sister worked for the company and ensured they had inside access to the service areas. On December 30th, Roland made his last attempt to maintain control. He appeared at Octavia's apartment unannounced, more disheveled than she'd ever seen him. Someone's been accessing my private files, he said, pacing her living room. They're trying to destroy us, Angel. But I won't let them. After tomorrow night, no one will be able to touch us. His desperation was palpable, the mask of confidence slipping to reveal the predator beneath. When he grabbed her arm, his grip was tight enough to bruise. You are mine, he hissed. Everything you are, everything you'll become, it's all because of me. Don't forget that. After he left, Octavia examined the bruises in her bathroom mirror. Perfect, she thought. More evidence for tomorrow night. The final pieces fell into place on New Year's Eve morning. Jennifer confirmed her position. She'd be attending as the date of a board member's son. Emily and Rebecca were already in place with the catering staff. Catherine, unaware she was playing into their hands, had scheduled her exposure for exactly when they needed it. At 7 p.m., Octavia began preparing for the party. The blue Valentino dress hugged her curves, the sapphire earrings caught the light. In her clutch, she carried a small recorder and a USB drive containing everything needed to destroy Roland Thorne. "Are you sure about this?" Dominic asked as she prepared to leave. "Once it starts." "He destroyed our lives, Dad," Octavia replied, checking her lipstick one last time. "Tonight, we destroy his." The drive to the Thorne mansion felt surreal. Snow had begun to fall, dusting Philadelphia's suburbs in white. Security was tight. Roland had hired extra guards, paranoid about gate crashes and paparazzi. Octavia's phone buzzed with a final text from Roland. "Can't wait to see you, Angel. Tonight changes everything." He had no idea how right he was. As she pulled up to the mansion's circular drive, Octavia saw Jennifer's car already parked among the luxury vehicles. Emily's sister waved discreetly from the catering entrance. Catherine stood at the front door greeting guests, her smile brittle, her eyes haunted. The pieces were in place. In less than 5 hours, when the countdown to midnight began, Roland Thorne would learn the true cost of his predatory games. But first, Octavia had to play her part one last time. The adoring mistress, the grateful protégé, the perfect victim. She checked her phone one last time. Messages confirmed everyone was in position. Jennifer, ready. Board member's son thinks we're dating. Emily, Kit Smith secured. Staff won't interfere. Rebecca, surveillance feeds looped. We're invisible after 11:30. Dominic, leaving in 3 hours. Evidence secure. Octavia took a deep breath and stepped out of her car, handing her keys to the valet. Above her, storm clouds gathered over the mansion, nature itself seeming to sense the approaching chaos. Through the windows, she could see Roland holding court in the grand ballroom, champagne in hand, unaware that his carefully constructed world was about to implode. "Happy New Year, Mr. Thorne," she whispered, ascending the steps into the warmth and light of the party. Let the games begin. The Thorne mansion blazed with light against the darkening sky, its windows throwing golden rectangles across the snow-dusted lawn. Inside, Philadelphia's elite mingled in a champagne haze, unaware they were about to witness the destruction of one of their own. The air was thick with expensive perfume and the murmur of privileged conversation, a perfect facade about to shatter. Octavia moved through the crowd like a ghost in blue Valentino, accepting congratulations from those who'd heard rumors of her promotion. Roland watched her from across the room, his possessive gaze following her every move. When their eyes met, she raised her champagne flute in a silent toast. He made his way to her, snaking through the crowd with practiced ease. "You look ravishing," he murmured, his hand settling on her lower back, fingers pressing possessively against silk. "Shall we tell them our news?" "Let's wait until midnight," Octavia suggested, her voice honeysweet. "Start the new year with a bang." In the Kit Smith, Emily Mitchell arranged hors d'oeuvres with mechanical precision, her server's uniform hiding years of rage. Through the service door, she watched her sister Rebecca positioning herself near the security office. Their roles in tonight's performance had been rehearsed to perfection. The evening progressed like a well-orchestrated symphony. Catherine Thorne climbed the grand staircase at 11:15, her crimson gown a slash of blood against marble. In her private study, she reviewed the files she thought would destroy her husband, unaware that her own revenge plot had been neatly folded into a larger, deadlier scheme. Jennifer Hayes played her part flawlessly, seducing the board member's son into a strategic position near Roland's private office. A stumble, a giggle, a seemingly innocent brush against the door, and the electronic locks code was captured by Rebecca's device, hidden in Jennifer's clutch. The arrival of Dominic Smith at 11:30 sent ripples through the crowd. Roland's face darkened at the sight of his former employee, but Octavia's quick intervention, a daughter's public plea for family reconciliation, trapped him in the web of social expectations. He could hardly have security remove her father on the eve of announcing their relationship, after all. Catherine's moment came at 11:45, but her carefully curated exposé had been replaced with something far more damning. The ballroom screens flickered to life with raw security footage, Roland with Octavia, with Jennifer, with Emily, years of predatory behavior exposed in high definition. Email threads detailing the systematic destruction of employees' lives, audio recordings of threats, financial documents revealing hush money payments, all played out before Philadelphia's horrified elite. Chaos erupted in the final minutes before midnight. Board members huddled in corners, phones out, damage control already beginning. Roland lunged for the AV controls, but found himself surrounded by ghosts from his past. Jennifer, Emily, and Rebecca emerged from the crowd, shedding their disguises like snakes shedding skin. "You," he snarled at Octavia, realization dawning. "I made you. I gave you everything." "You took everything," she corrected, her voice carrying in the sudden hush. "From all of us." The facade finally cracked. Roland charged toward Octavia with murderous rage. "You ungrateful little bitch." Dominic stepped between them, but Roland was beyond reason. He grabbed a champagne bottle, swinging it like a club. As the grandfather clock began to strike midnight and fireworks illuminated the sky outside, a single gunshot cracked louder than any celebration. Roland staggered backward, red blooming across his white shirt. Catherine stood at the top of the stairs, her husband's own gun steady in her manicured hands. "Happy New Year, darling," she said softly. The aftermath unfolded like a perfectly scripted play. Police swarmed the mansion, collecting statements from shell-shocked guests. Detective Emily Martinez took charge of the scene, noting the strange precision of it all, how every witness had a clear view, how perfectly the evidence had been preserved, how each participant had an ironclad alibi for the exact moment of the shooting. As Roland Thorne's body was wheeled out into the first hours of 2009, snow began falling again, covering the tire tracks and footprints around the mansion. By morning, all evidence of the night's events would be buried under a clean white blanket, leaving only the aftermath to deal with in the cold light of day. The perfect murder had played out in plain sight, and not a single person in attendance would ever forget the New Year's Eve when justice was served at the stroke of midnight. The first weeks of 2009 unfolded in a whirlwind of headlines and hushed conversations across Philadelphia. The Philadelphia Inquirer's front page blared, "Thorne Pharmaceutical CEO shot dead at New Year's party," while tabloids screamed, "Revenge of the trophy wife," and "Predator CEO's deadly comeuppance." Detective Emily Martinez sat in her office at Philadelphia PD, walls covered with photographs and timelines from the Thorne case. Something about it nagged at her, the perfect positioning of witnesses, the flawless execution of Catherine's defensive shot, the convenient timing of every revelation. But the evidence was irrefutable. Roland Thorne had attacked Octavia Smith in front of dozens of witnesses, and Catherine Thorne had acted in defense of another. The investigation revealed layers of corruption that shocked even Philadelphia's cynical business community. Forensic accountants discovered millions in hush money payments stretching back 2 decades. Former employees came forward with stories of harassment, blackmail, and ruined careers. Roland Thorne's predatory pattern became clear: young women from families financially dependent on the company, their fathers in vulnerable positions, perfect targets for manipulation. Catherine Thorne played her role masterfully in the aftermath. Grieving widow turned avenging angel, she garnered public sympathy with carefully crafted interviews. "I couldn't let him hurt another young woman," she told 60 Minutes, tears glinting perfectly. "In that moment, I saw my younger self in Octavia's eyes." The district attorney's office declined to press charges, ruling the shooting justifiable homicide. Catherine's high-powered legal team presented a compelling case of cumulative trauma and fear for others' safety. The civil suits that followed were settled quietly, with generous compensation for Roland's past victims. Thorne Pharmaceuticals underwent a seismic shift. The board, eager to distance themselves from scandal, appointed Catherine as interim CEO. Her first act was to reinstate Dominic Smith as department head of research and development, a significant promotion from his previous position. The company established a foundation supporting victims of workplace harassment, with Jennifer Hayes appointed as executive director. Octavia Smith withdrew her medical school applications, the dream of becoming a doctor tainted by Roland's influence. Instead, she channeled her experience into advocacy, working with Emily Mitchell and Rebecca Torres to create a support network for survivors of workplace exploitation. Their organization, Phoenix Rising, became a powerful force for corporate accountability. But beneath the public narrative of justice served and lessons learned, a deeper truth remained known only to a select few. Late one night, 6 months after the shooting, Detective Martinez received an anonymous envelope. Inside, she found a series of emails between Octavia and Catherine Thorne, dated weeks before the New Year's Eve party. The messages revealed the full scope of their collaboration, how Catherine had discovered Octavia's plan for revenge and chose to participate, seeing an opportunity to eliminate Roland while ensuring her own position. The shooting wasn't a spontaneous act of defense, but the culmination of a meticulously orchestrated plot. Martinez sat at her desk, staring at the evidence that would unravel the official story. After hours of consideration, she fed the papers into her shredder. Some truths, she decided, served no purpose except to deny closure to those who had suffered enough. 1 year later, at a private dinner celebrating Phoenix Rising's first anniversary, Octavia raised a toast to the women who had helped her bring down a predator. Jennifer, Emily, and Rebecca clinked glasses, while Catherine watched from the head of the table, her smile holding secrets they would all take to their graves. Dominic Smith, now thriving in his new position, looked at his daughter with a mixture of pride and lingering sadness. They had never spoken directly about that night, about the choices made and prices paid. Some wounds healed best when left unbandaged. The Thorne mansion was sold, its rooms stripped of Roland's presence. Catherine moved into a penthouse overlooking Rittenhouse Square, her public image transformed from trophy wife to corporate feminist icon. She and Octavia maintained a careful distance in public, their alliance hidden beneath layers of plausible deniability. In the end, Roland Thorne's legacy was not the pharmaceutical empire he built, but the network of survivors who emerged from his abuse stronger and more determined. His attempt to prey on a young woman he thought he could control had instead created an instrument of his own destruction. The snow that fell on Philadelphia on New Year's Eve 2009 was just as thick as the year before. In her new office at Phoenix Rising, Octavia watched the flakes swirl past her window and thought about power, how it could corrupt, how it could destroy, and how it could, in the right hands, bring justice. She opened her desk drawer and removed a small box containing Roland's sapphire earrings. She had kept them as a reminder, not of his power over her, but of her own strength. Tomorrow, they would be auctioned off, the proceeds funding scholarships for survivors of workplace abuse. Detective Martinez retired the following spring, the Thorne case officially closed but never quite forgotten. On her last day, she received a thank you note from an anonymous sender. Inside was a single sapphire earring, a silent acknowledgement of truths best left unspoken. The story of Roland Thorne's death became urban legend in Philadelphia's corporate circles, a cautionary tale about power and its limits. But for those who orchestrated his downfall, it remained what it had always been, a perfect execution of justice, served cold on a snowy New Year's Eve.